DC looked at Superman, the most recognizable superhero on the planet, and decided he should be a mechanic from Smallville who bonds with an alien parasite that slowly erases who he is as a person. No cape, no S-shield, just a biological scar on his chest that bleeds when he pushes too hard. That's the new Superman, and it sold 300,000 copies. Here's every absolute DC title, what changed, and why it's working. DC All-In Special. On October 2nd, 2024, DC released a single comic that functionally rewrote the rules of their entire publishing line. The DC All-In Special, written by Scott Snyder and Joshua Williamson, dropped the same day Absolute Power ended, and it hit like a reset button on decades of tangled multiverse nonsense. Here's what makes this thing wild. It's 64 pages, priced at $7.99, and it exists for one reason: to establish that every hero in the Absolute universe operates in complete isolation. No shared continuity, no crossover obligations. Each character gets their own mythology, built from zero, and DC wasn't subtle about their commitment. Retailers were required to order this book as part of a coordinated rollout. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. The brilliance is the simplicity. One issue, one clean break. Every Absolute title that followed traces directly back to this single comic as its founding document. No gradual transition, no soft reboot disguised as a storyline. Just a hard line in the sand, but if the All-In Special was the big bang, then what came next was the first star to form. And it might be the best Batman comic in 20 years. Absolute Batman. Absolute Batman dropped on October 9th, 2024, and it didn't just hit shelves, it shattered expectations. Written by Scott Snyder with art by Nick Dragotta, this launch stunned DC by selling 250,000 copies, making it the publisher's best-selling Batman debut since 2020. But here's the kicker. This isn't your usual Gotham Batfest. Forget capes, gadgets, or superpowers. This Batman is pure human grit, stripped down to Bruce Wayne as a man without any superhuman edge. The city itself has changed too. Gotham is a decaying industrial wasteland run by brutal criminal cartels, not theatrical costumed villains. The first story arc, The Zoo, spans issues 1 through 6 and is packed with long, visceral fight scenes averaging 12 pages apiece. These aren't flashy brawls, but raw, grounded combat sequences that make you feel every punch and scrape. Even the Batsuit looks like something forged from scavenged military gear. No high-tech wizardry, just tactical realism. It screams urban survival rather than comic book hero. And then there's Dick Grayson. He shows up as a deeply traumatized circus acrobat who doesn't have a clue about Bruce's secret life as Batman. Talk about flipping the script on a classic partnership. Scott Snyder openly said this Batman would lose a fight against Daredevil, the ultimate street-level hero. That brutally honest take has fans divided. Stripping away all the mythic elements could make Batman more relatable, or maybe it just leaves him vulnerable and less compelling. But here's the thing. Absolute Batman's radical, no-frills approach forces us to ask, does Batman need his legend, or is the man beneath the mask powerful enough on his own? Stick with me, because if you think this grounded Gotham is dark, wait until we dive into Absolute Wonder Woman. Absolute Wonder Woman. Kelly Thompson did something genuinely brilliant with this book. She took Diana's oldest enemy and turned her into her mother. Here's the setup. In this universe, Diana is the last Amazon. Not one of the last, not among the few remaining. The last. Period. As an infant, she's exiled to the underworld, which is already a rough start to life. But instead of dying alone in literal hell, she's found by Circe. The same Circe who, in every other version of this story, exists purely to destroy Wonder Woman. But here's where it gets weird. Circe doesn't kill her. She raises her, nurtures her, builds a home in the caves of Tartarus, and fills it with warmth specifically so this child can grow. She deliberately spares Diana's life not out of weakness, but because she sees the potential to mold her into something greater than any Amazon before her. A weapon against humanity, sure, but also a daughter. The emotional core of this whole series is that mother-daughter bond. Enemies rewritten as tragic surrogate family. It shouldn't work, but it absolutely does. And visually, this thing is unmistakable. Hayden Sherman uses a restricted crimson and charcoal palette across the entire first arc. All 5 issues, 170 pages of Hellforged mythology rendered in blood and ash. Diana doesn't carry a golden lasso here. She wields the lasso of damnation, forged in Tartarus itself. Everything about her aesthetic screams Underworld champion rather than Paradise warrior. The book launched at $5.99 with 180,000 initial orders. Not Batman numbers, but significantly above Wonder Woman's historical averages. Turns out people respond when you give Diana an identity that isn't just Superman but female and Greek. But if you think a warrior raised in hell sounds intense, wait until you meet a Superman who doesn't even have a cape. Absolute Superman. Yes, it's basically Venom. Let's just get that out of the way now. Clark Kent bonds with a sentient alien suit that gives him powers, talks to him in his head, and slowly consumes his identity. You're thinking it? I'm thinking it. Everyone on Reddit said it within 45 seconds of the first preview dropping. But here's the thing, it actually works. Jason Aaron and Rafa Sandoval launched this book in November 2024, and it moved 300,000 copies. That's DC's highest Superman debut since 2005. And the reason it hit that hard is because it takes the single most iconic superhero on the planet and strips him down to someone you'd buy a beer for. Clark Kent is a mechanic, not a reporter, not mild-mannered anything. He's a blue-collar guy in Smallville with grease under his fingernails. His powers don't come from the yellow sun. They come from a Kryptonian AI symbiote that bonds to his body, heals his injuries in real time, and slowly erases who he is as a person. Which is not ideal. The visual detail that sells the entire concept is the chest. There's no S-shield. Instead, Clark has a jagged biological scar where the symbiote fused with his body. It bleeds kryptonite-laced plasma when he pushes too hard. Power costs something, and the bill comes due in flesh. The primary antagonist is Lazarus Corporation, a mega-conglomerate mining kryptonite for profit and weaponization. Corporate greed versus a working-class alien who didn't ask for any of this. It's not subtle. It doesn't need to be. The Venom comparison is surface level. What Aaron actually built is a Superman who has to choose, every single day, between being powerful and being human. And that tension is what makes this book sing. But if Superman's identity crisis sounds rough, wait until you see what they did to the Speed Force. Because it's not an energy field anymore. It's hungry. Absolute Flash. Barry Allen has always been the good guy. The mentor, the moral compass of the DC universe who sacrificed himself to save reality and spent decades as a martyr before coming back. So, naturally, the Absolute Universe made him a villain. Let me explain. Absolute Flash was announced as part of DC's Absolute Universe lineup, the second wave of titles expanding the imprint beyond its initial Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman launches. The Absolute Universe's whole premise is taking iconic heroes and stripping away their safety nets, their wealth, their support systems, their legacy advantages, and rebuilding them from nothing. For Flash, that means reimagining the speedster mythos from the ground up. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The Absolute Universe has already established that familiar characters get twisted into unrecognizable shapes. Absolute Batman is Bruce Wayne without the billions. Absolute Superman is Kal-El without the Kents. So, Absolute Flash, continuing that pattern of removing what makes a hero comfortable and forcing them to earn it through pure will isn't surprising. What's surprising is how far they're willing to push the Flash legacy into darker territory, potentially reframing the Speed itself as something closer to a curse than a blessing. The Speed has always been treated as pure upside in mainline DC. You run fast, you save people, you vibrate through walls, you maybe mess up the timeline once or twice, but it works out. Stripping that optimism away and making the power genuinely costly is the kind of reimagining that either elevates a character or breaks them entirely. There's no middle ground, and the Absolute imprint has proven it's not afraid of breaking things. But if a darker take on the Flash sounds intense, wait until you hear what happened to John Johns. Because Absolute Martian Manhunter makes this look almost optimistic. Absolute Martian Manhunter. This is the weird one. And I mean that as the highest possible compliment. Absolute Martian Manhunter released on March 26, 2025, written by Denise Camp with art by Javier Rodriguez. And it immediately established itself as the most creatively unhinged book in the entire Absolute lineup. It was originally planned as a 6-issue miniseries. Then DC expanded it to 12, because when something this strange is also this good, you don't cut it short. Here's the pitch. John Johns is not a Martian. He's not an alien at all. He's a fractured psychic entity, manifested from humanity's collective subconscious. The thing walking around in a green cape is basically a wound-given form, a scar in the shape of a person. And his shape-shifting? It's not clean. It's not cool. It involves painful temporary assimilation of host bodies that leaves behind hollowed psychic husks visible only to other Martians. Which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets genuinely insane. This comic contains zero traditional dialogue. None. The entire story is told through thought bubbles and visual metaphors. A mainstream DC superhero book with no spoken words. Denise Camp looked at the script format and said, "No thanks, I'll communicate exclusively through vibes and dread." During psychic episodes, Rodriguez locks into rigid 9-panel grids that make each page feel like a cage closing around you. And the fire vulnerability? It's not a biological weakness anymore. It's a subconscious manifestation of cremation rituals. Because John isn't one entity. He's the amalgamated trauma of murdered children. That's the reveal. That's what's underneath the shape-shifting and the telepathy. Just grief, compressed into something that looks like a person. This is the series most likely to show up on best-of-decade lists 10 years from now. I don't know what else to tell you, but if you think psychic horror is unsettling, wait until you see what happens when a dead god's corpse crash lands on a small town, Absolute Green Lantern. Absolute Green Lantern is immediately striking because it embraces the iconic green glow but pushes it into profoundly eerie territory. The series leans heavily into a moody palette, mixing deep shadows with vibrant green light that feels more ominous than heroic. Written by James Tynion IV with art by Ethan Van Sciver, it launched in late 2021 and quickly made waves. The first print run was around 125,000 copies, solid for a prestige DC title, and the hardcover editions sold out fast, showing fans were all in for this darker take. Here's the setup. Joe Mullen, a relatively new Green Lantern, becomes the ring bearer for a mysterious power that's far less straightforward than classic Lantern tales. Instead of the usual confident bond and inspiring oath, Joe's relationship with her ring is fraught. She experiences intense psychological strain and visions that hint at something deeply wrong beneath the surface of the core. The narrative deliberately dials back on the traditional oath, highlighting dissonance rather than unity. While the stories explore some moral ambiguity and the grimmer consequences of wielding the ring, the core mythology remains intact. The Green Lantern Corps are still champions of willpower, not cosmic parasites or dead gods. The series adds layers of cosmic mystery and horror elements but doesn't rewrite the fundamental lore. It's basically a blend of classic space opera with a suspenseful edge, leaning into cosmic dread without losing the hope the core stands for. Fans of more mature psychological superhero stories appreciated the mood shift, while longtime Lantern fans debated the darker tone, but nobody called for a full mythology overhaul. At least this cosmic drama keeps the green front and center, otherwise, the eyes might actually bleed from noxious yellow or gray tones. But if you think this mix of hope and horror is intense, wait until we dive into Absolute Evil next. Absolute Evil DC has long loved reimagining villains, but few concepts hit as hard as the idea of villainy as a force of nature. It might not be an official title, but the notion of absolute evil lurking beneath the surface has haunted their stories for decades. No official comic called Absolute Evil launched in 2025 or anytime soon. There isn't a Shadow Council made up exactly of Ra's al Ghul, Veronica Cale, Hector Hammond, Eleanor Thawne, and a new Joker that comes together voluntarily without outside manipulation. DC villains have teamed up plenty, but usually with some cosmic puppeteer pulling strings or an unavoidable crisis forcing their hand. And the Joker? There's no canonical Joseph Jack Grimm V, no eternal chaos entity hopping bodies through history from ancient Rome to Victorian London. The Joker's origin and nature have been told many ways, with multiple conflicting versions, but nothing quite that specific or sweeping. The decades of inconsistent Joker portrayals are usually chalked up to retcons, alternate Earths, or unreliable narrators, not a single mythic entity. The idea that these villains might secretly be cosmic guardians battling some primordial dark older than the DC universe? That's creative fan speculation at best. No such force exists in DC continuity, and no storyline paints villains as reluctant protectors maintaining a cosmic balance the heroes don't see. But here's where the concept still gets wild. Imagining these villains not just as selfish or chaotic, but as pieces in a much larger puzzle trying to hold reality together. It flips the usual hero-villain dynamic on its head in a way that's perfect for DC's darker, more complex storytelling strands. I don't know what this means for the future of DC Comics, but it's definitely a different way to think about evil. That's either the most brilliant fan theory or the most unhinged. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.